So walk me through this book and how much, I guess, Caitlin Clark's, was there any cooperation, any reach out to her at all, Christine, for this book?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. She
Great.
answered 40 to 50 questions that
Awesome.
I asked. Yeah, she's great. She's better in person than you'd hope. Yeah, what happened was right around the time actually you and I spoke, which was the Olympic snub, which, by
Yes.
the way, is a chapter title in the book. And I have even more reporting on that abysmal decision. And I continue to report it. So there's breaking news within the book on
When
that.
Christine Brennan walked into the Rich Eisen show studio, nobody expected what was about to happen next. This veteran sports journalist, who spent 4 decades fighting for women's basketball in the trenches, was about to drop the most devastating critique of WNBA leadership that basketball media has ever witnessed. And what she revealed about Caitlin Clark's true impact on the league will leave you absolutely stunned. Brennan didn't just criticize the WNBA.
Things. But within a few weeks, I was, just early July thinking, gosh, should I maybe do a book on this? I hadn't written a book in a long time. And this has become my 8th book, 4th with Scribner. Literally 54 weeks ago, there was no book. And now we're number 2 on the New York Times bestseller list. So, it shows what it shows, Rich, is the incredible power, appeal of this 23-year-old.
She absolutely torched them in ways that made everyone in that studio uncomfortable. She laid bare exactly how the league completely fumbled what she called their golden opportunity, proving once and for all that the WNBA simply wasn't ready for prime time. Her words are now causing major waves across basketball media. And after you hear what she had to say, you'll understand why some people are calling this the most important interview about women's basketball ever recorded.
It wouldn't have been caught dead watching women's basketball when I would be on radio shows, or you and I might be talking at various things. Guys would laugh like, "You're not covering the women's Final Four, are you? Like, why would you go to the women's Olympic gold medal game at all the Olympics I cover? What a waste of time. It's not good basketball. It's below the rim. They're rolling around on the floor. It's jump balls." These are the things I heard. I was laughed at as I would advocate.
But here's what makes this critique so absolutely devastating. This isn't coming from some random blogger or social media personality taking cheap shots at the WNBA. This is Christine Brennan, a USA Today columnist who has been fighting for women's sports coverage for over 40 years. She's been in the trenches advocating for female athletes when most
advocate the coverage of women's basketball, among all the other things that I've been able to do, men's and women's, right? Sports. And honest to goodness, to see now those guys that would have been calling into sports talk shows around the country laughing, they're the guys now buying the number 22 jerseys. They're wearing them not only to games, but to the grocery store and the gas station. They are Caitlin Clark's biggest fans, and they are the reason that
media
these
outlets couldn't care less about women's basketball. We're talking about someone who endured decades of dismissive comments, who was literally laughed at for covering women's sports when guys would mock her for even attending the women's Final Four. Think about that for a moment. This is a woman who faced ridicule for decades, who heard all the dismissive comments about women's basketball being below the rim and not good basketball. She was there fighting battles that nobody else wanted to fight, advocating for coverage when the entire sports media landscape was telling her it was a waste of time. So when someone with that kind...
average home attendance last year, first year of Caitlin Clark, was higher than the average home attendance of 5 NBA teams. I cannot even believe I said that sentence, and I researched it, and it's in On Her Game. Point being, this has absolutely been a sea change, the likes of which I did not envision seeing in my...
credibility and that kind of history starts criticizing the WNBA's handling of their biggest star. You better pay attention. And what Brennan revealed next will blow your mind. She talked about something that represents a complete cultural transformation that nobody saw coming. The same guys who used to mock women's basketball are now buying Caitlin Clark jerseys and wearing them not only to games, but to the grocery store and the gas station. These
my career. That's how big a deal. And I chronicled the whole thing, and Caitlin answered every question, tough questions, looked you in the eye, goes on and on with answers, goes off on a tangent, comes back and finishes the answer. I mean, she's just...
Fans, these former skeptics are now Caitlin Clark's biggest supporters, and they are the reason that TV ratings are absolutely through the roof. This represents a complete cultural shift that the WNBA was completely unprepared for. For decades, women's basketball has struggled to gain mainstream acceptance, especially among male sports fans. These are the same guys who wouldn't be caught dead watching women's basketball just a few years ago. Then Clark comes along, and suddenly you have this unprecedented phenomenon in women's.
Breen, she likes Caitlin Clark. She gets it. At least I thought she got it. But when she did that, I mean, Shelton and Caitlin go back a long way because of Iowa and Ohio State through the Big Ten. And so, there's chippy play. And Caitlin Clark does not need me or you or anyone to defend her. Oh, she's not a victim. She gives it as good as she takes it. She's tough. She's strong. She's revving up the crowd. She loves it. And people love her for that. But when Marina Mabrey plowed into Caitlin Clark like a freight train, if that did not injure Caitlin Clark, as far as we know, although now she's had these 4 injuries, and the last time she missed a game was sophomore year of high school.
Basketball just a few years ago. Then Clark comes along, and suddenly you have this unprecedented phenomenon in women's professional sports, where traditional skeptics are becoming die-hard fans. But here's where it gets really frustrating. Instead of capitalizing on this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, the WNBA seem to actively work against their own interests. And Brennan's book reveals just how unprepared the league was for what she called the tsunami of attention that Clark brought with her from college. The most shocking...
So bizarre, absolutely bizarre what's happening. And so obviously disheartening for Caitlin Clark and so many of her fans. But when Marina Mabrey does that, you know who she's hurting at the end of the day? She's hurting Marina Mabrey and her earning potential. Because when Caitlin Clark is in...
Revelation came when Brennan described a phone call with a WNBA official about Clark's impact. What was she hearing in that official's voice? Not happiness, not anticipation, not excitement about this incredible opportunity. No, it was something else entirely. Anxiety and uncertainty about how to handle their newfound popularity.
Clark is injured. The first time she was injured this year, Rich, she would miss 5 games. During those 5 games when she disappeared, more than half of the viewership of the WNBA, not just the Fever, but the WNBA, more than half of the viewership also disappeared.
Let that sink in for a moment. You have a league that has struggled for relevance and financial stability for nearly 3 decades. And when they finally get a player who can solve both problems, they're worried instead of excited. It's like winning the lottery and being concerned about having too much money. The reaction was completely backwards for an organization that should have been celebrating this incredible.
Others over the years, over half of your TV audience just disappears. That is devastating to the WNBA and to its financial future, and all those players with the CBA now up and they're having these negotiations. They need to realize sooner than later.
To put this in perspective, Brennan compared Clark's impact to legendary figures like Tiger Woods and Michael Jordan. But here's the thing. Even those transformative athletes never had this kind of impact on their respective leagues' viewership. When Tiger was absent from a major tournament, golf ratings would dip a little. When Michael Jordan retired to play baseball, NBA ratings dropped a little. But nothing like the cliff dive that happens when Clark is out of the lineup. What makes this even more damaging is that some of the physical play directed at Clark seems completely counterproductive to the league's own interests. Brennan specifically called out incidents like Marina Mabrey's hit on Clark, pointing out something that should be obvious to everyone. When you injure the player responsible for driving half your viewership, you're literally hurting your own earning potential.
Not that you treat her like kid gloves, but that Caitlin is to them even more important than Tiger was to men's golf. Because men's golf had already had Arnie Jack, Byron Nelson, Sam Snead, going all the way back to Bobby Jones. It already had the commercials and the standing with...
The financial implications are absolutely staggering when you really think about it. Every game Clark misses costs the league millions in lost advertising revenue, reduced merchandise sales, and decreased ticket prices. Yet some players seem more focused on making physical statements than protecting what Brennan called the golden goose. It's mind-boggling that professional athletes would actively work against their own financial interests. But here's what makes Clark's situation truly unique, and this is where Brennan's analysis becomes absolutely crucial. She made a comparison to Tiger Woods that reveals everything you need to know about why the WNBA's handling of this situation has been so catastrophic. When Tiger elevated golf, that sport already had an established foundation with commercial success and cultural standing. Golf had Arnold Palmer, Jack Nicklaus, Byron Nelson, Sam Snead, going all the way back to Bobby Jones. It already had the commercials and the standing within sport. The WNBA never had that foundation. They've been fighting for scraps of attention and revenue for decades in a male-dominated sports world. Clark isn't just elevating an already successful league like Tiger did with golf. She's single-handedly creating mainstream relevance that never existed before. The responsibility that comes with that is enormous, and the WNBA has largely failed to live up to it. This brings us to one of the most sensitive but unavoidable aspects of this entire saga: the racial dynamics that Brennan addresses in her book. The WNBA is 74% black, and Clark is a white, straight player entering a league with a significant LGBTQ+ population. That dynamic was always going to create some tension, but the league should have been prepared to manage it effectively.
Instead, you had veteran players making dismissive comments about Clark's impact, current players taking cheap shots, and a general sense that Clark needed to pay her dues before being accepted. That might be normal rookie treatment in most circumstances, but when that rookie is responsible for doubling your television ratings, maybe it's time to adjust your approach. The Olympic snub that Brennan covers extensively in her book represents another perfect example of how institutions failed to recognize Clark's unique value. The fact that the player driving unprecedented interest in women's basketball was left off the Olympic team shows just how disconnected decision-makers were from the reality of Clark's impact on the sport. What's particularly frustrating about all of this is that the solutions were completely obvious if anyone had been paying attention. Clark's popularity wasn't some mysterious phenomenon that nobody could understand. It was clearly tied to her playing style, her college success, and her incredible ability to connect with fans. The league could have built entire marketing campaigns around that, created storylines that embraced the attention, and positioned other players to benefit from the spotlight. Instead, they seem to actively resist the attention and treat Clark's popularity as something to be managed rather than celebrated. It's like being handed a winning lottery ticket and complaining about having to go to the bank to cash it. The missed opportunities are just staggering when you really think about it. Brennan also highlighted something that represents a fundamental shift in how women's sports are perceived in mainstream culture. The guys who used to laugh at women's basketball coverage are now the most engaged fans. But the league's response to this increased media attention has been completely problematic. Instead of embracing the scrutiny and using it to promote the sport, they've often been defensive and hostile. The perfect example of this came with what Brennan called the DJI Carrington controversy. When Brennan asked legitimate journalistic questions about whether a hit on Clark was intentional, the WNBA Players Association posted a lengthy statement calling for her media credentials to be revoked. This kind of response shows a fundamental misunderstanding of how professional sports work. In every other major league, players expect to be asked tough questions about controversial plays. That's part of being a professional athlete. The fact that the WNBA Players Association tried to silence a veteran journalist for doing her job shows just how unprepared they were for big league scrutiny. What makes this even more ridiculous is that Brennan has been one of the strongest advocates for women's sports throughout her entire career. As one observer noted, if you're going to attack someone who has spent 40 years advocating for female athletes. You better have your facts straight. The business implications of these missteps are enormous. Clark's popularity has created opportunities for revenue growth that the WNBA has never had before. Sponsorship deals, television contracts, merchandise sales, and ticket prices have all increased dramatically because of her presence. But that growth is fragile and completely dependent on Clark staying healthy and engaged. What Brennan revealed about Clark transcending basketball is perhaps the most important point of all. She's become a cultural phenomenon that goes far beyond traditional basketball fans. The fact that guys are wearing her jersey to grocery stores shows that her appeal extends into mainstream culture in ways that are incredibly rare in professional sports. You can count on one hand the number of athletes who have achieved this level of cultural relevance. The WNBA had lightning in a bottle and largely wasted it because they were too worried about traditional power structures and internal politics. Commissioner Kathy Engelbert comes in for particular criticism, with Brennan noting how she has trouble even talking about Caitlin Clark without immediately deflecting to other players. The CBA negotiations happening now make all of this even more relevant. Players are asking for more money and better working conditions, but they're doing so while actively undermining the one person most responsible for increased league revenue. It's like employees demanding raises while criticizing the company's best salesperson. What's really heartbreaking about all of this is that Clark herself has handled everything with remarkable professionalism, despite taking cheap shots, being excluded from Team USA, and dealing with constant controversy. She's continued to perform at an elite level and represent the league positively. She's been the perfect ambassador for women's basketball, and the league has largely failed to support her. The long-term implications could be devastating for the WNBA. Clark won't play forever, and the window for capitalizing on her popularity is limited. If the league continues to treat their biggest star as a problem to be managed rather than an asset to be celebrated, they risk losing momentum that took decades to build. Christine Brennan's book and her media appearances serve as a wake-up call for anyone who cares about women's basketball. The WNBA has been handed the keys to mainstream relevance, but they need to learn how to drive the car before it's too late. Her criticism exposes exactly how the league fumbled the biggest opportunity in women's sports history, and the numbers don't lie.